was the PC chair this year, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what happened maybe behind the scenes. So the obligatory thing to do here is to present you a series of numbers, and so I'll do that. And a wordle. Yeah, so there's really only two numbers I want to focus on. If you have questions about any of the other stuff, the slides are on the web, and you can just grab me and that'll be fine. But there's really only two I think I should take our time in this setting for. One is the number 3. That is, so this year I insisted that PC members were not allowed to submit papers. And put that in the invitation when I was inviting people, and this is how many people said no, and gave that reason. I asked everyone why when they said no. So 3 said no. Guess how many submitted of those 3?
None.
Correct. So I'm not sure what this number means. Maybe it just indicates a lack of commitment to ICFP, and then maybe I'm okay with people saying no for that reason. Okay, so that's one experience. This is the second number I want to talk to you about briefly. That is the number of submissions. So this is the unhappy part of the talk, because last year there were 112 submissions, and the 3 years before that there were 100 each year, and then you see that we were growing in the years before that. And so I don't really have a good answer for this number, and why we've had this significant drop from past years. But I do want to take this moment to point out that there's this meme going around that functional programming is useful, and you see that in our attendance numbers. And part of the reason is the obvious parallelism thing, but I think there's lots of reasons that go into this. Like functional programmers are much easier to test, for example, and this kind of agile methodologies are catching on, and so they work better in functions. And I'm sure there's other reasons out there for those of you who know other aspects of the community. So there's this opportunity for significant growth in this community, and it appears to me that FP is going to take over the world. And the question is whether or not will it take over or not, but will it be will we have some influence on that? And will we be able to take all these good ideas that we have here and actually let them make it out into the world and survive? So, anyway, work harder. Okay, so 2 more points I want to talk about. I used a different scheme this year. Instead of, you may have noticed, for those who submitted papers, that there was not A, B, C, D on your reviews. And that's because I used a different system. So I noticed that this is kind of an opportunity to have an economic gain, the numbers that the PC members put onto their papers as they evaluate them with A, B, C, D, or whatever. So we have some algorithm mechanism design people in my department in Northwestern. So I went to talk to them to find out, well, maybe there's a better game you could play. And they sent me to some economists at Chicago, so I went to talk to them. And the upshot of what I learned is that you can effectively trade off the amount of information that you get from the PC for to combat potential biases that the PC might have. I mean, I don't mean biases in the sense that, oh, if this is a paper by somebody with initials MF, I must reject, but more kind of systematic biases that you might see. So, let me tell you the mechanics of the thing, and then the bias that I was aiming to eliminate. So every reviewer was given $50, and they could spend that $50 however they liked on the paper with the caveat that they must spend all of the money. And there was I made this separate web form thing that only let them enter, click that OK, I submit my scores button when the numbers summed up to 50. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm constraining the average. So every reviewer has the same average score now. And the bias that I wanted to combat was the reviewer that says essentially, I hate all papers, or I love all papers. I want to try to force people to make a little bit more of a distinction. So of course, I'm sure half the room is right now going, oh, but what if I get a really great batch of papers? And when you ask me that question, you're essentially calling shenanigans on my bias. So, okay, so maybe this is not really a bias, and maybe what really happens is that you get a huge pile, every so often you just get a really good pile of papers. So my experience sitting on a number of PCs over the years, and in reviewing that we do for the NSF in the United States, suggests that actually there are people out there who just like to like things or like to hate things, and that it's much less common that you get, at least in my experience, I've not really ever gotten a patch of papers that were all excellent or all horrible. But I have seen others who I believe also did not have such badges, but nevertheless gave essentially uniform scores. So that's why I experimented with this system. One other bonus is that when you get to that last paper, you want to give it a certain amount of money, and probably the amount of money that you have left is not the amount that you want to give to it. So you have to go back and look at the earlier papers and make some decisions about where you take money away or where you're going to give more of the money. And I found that when I'm reviewing papers, that second pass, when I make it, when I look carefully at a paper that I've read carefully some months ago at the beginning of the reviewing process, I've actually, somehow in the back of my head, I've actually learned a lot more about what was happening in that paper than I did when I just read it, even though I haven't really been paying much attention to it. And so that second pass can be very valuable in, for the PC, I think, to do their job well. So that's kind of a bonus of this system. Okay, so let me tell you a little more about numbers. These are the numbers here. So I'm just not going to show you all these, but these are histograms, one per reviewer that was on the PC, where going along the x-axis is scores, and then the y-axis is how many of that score did they assign. So you can kind of just get it. The overall looking at this thing, you're like, yeah, people are playing, roughly. There's like lots of things going on in there. And I pulled out two in particular that I want to point you to, the bottom right and the upper left one. So the bottom right, this person just basically gave binary decisions. And if all of the histograms look like that, I would say this is a failure of a system. Okay, so that's one. Where this person is probably giving, maybe they would have given the same amount of information in the ABCD system too. And then the upper left, this person had a bunch of papers they didn't like, and they wanted to reject. And then they had other papers and they ranked them. That's what's happening there. So we're getting actually more information in this particular case than you would get from the ABCD system. Okay, so and then there's lots of, so people are playing along roughly. All right, so how did it turn out? This is one bubble per paper that we discussed in the PC meeting. And if you read left to right and then top to bottom, that's the order in which we discussed them. So there's no real correlation between order and acceptance. I mean, you see some streaks here and there and stuff like that. But what I did was I randomized the papers. Well, I randomized all the papers that had no conflicts, and then I randomized all the papers that had a conflict. So we did all the no conflict ones first. So then, I don't know, maybe there's something there. So this is how it looks when you divide them up by score, what the score they got. And you see that there's a correlation between low numbers and rejection. Let's see. So this one here in the bottom right, that's a paper that I don't know the score because I'm conflicted with it. All I know is it was rejected. So I just stuck it on the side over there. So I'll point out two more things about these bubbles. So you see the green, the leftmost green, and the rightmost red. There's kind of one of each of those, and then there's a more concentrated region of ambiguity. Those were actually the papers that PC struggled with the most. We didn't know at the time that they were the leftmost green and the rightmost red, but they were definitely the papers where it was not clear what was the right decision to be made, and that came out through the discussion. I think in both cases we made the right decision. I'm happy about all these decisions, but okay, so a little more information about that. All right. Okay, so I don't think anyone will be surprised by my answer, changing topics, to my answer to this question. We are here to improve the quality of functional programming research, and through that effort, to make society better. Right? That's what we're here for. What I don't see, however, is that we don't really remind ourselves of that, at least not in a public way. So I wanted to take this opportunity to try to do that. And not just today. I throughout this whole time as a PC chair, I took that opportunity and tried to do that. So in particular, when I invited the program committee, I put in the letter very clearly, your main job is to take your expertise as a functional programming researcher, read these papers, try to put yourself in the shoes of these authors, and then try to write something that will help them level up their functional programming food. Right? Your job is only secondarily, I mean, we have to decide on the program, but your job only secondarily is to say, these are the good ones and these are the bad ones. Your job primarily is to try to help these people, find out where they are, help them become better at what they're trying to do. Okay, so there's certain non-areas in that, but okay, I don't think there's any shortage of that in the room. That wasn't the issue. So I sent this in the initial invitation. I mentioned it in various emails in various different ways using different words. People wrote reviews. Reviews came in. I wrote back and said, this review is not good enough. Work harder. You can do a better job with this review. I mean, typically what would happen is I would read the paper and I would read the review and I would go, okay, there's a good point in this review, but the authors are not going to get it because there's a lot of emotion. When you get a negative review, it can be hard to read. And there can be important information for you that you should really learn about in this review, but you're not going to read it because there's a little bit of, you might find it just sort of too inflammatory, or the beginning of it is saying something that's, you're not going to read past that beginning because it just looks wrong to you, and you're not going to get to this, these nuggets. Okay, and I think that keeping our focus on this is really the way to, it's not just important for the community and society in some small way that we're trying to improve doing this, but it also helps, like me, as a person. If I keep my focus on this, then I stop worrying about things like bean counting. You know, I'm not, oh man, my dean is going to really like the fact that I blah, 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 or, oh look, this is the third paper. I've got my third paper. I've got my third paper at a top tier conference now. Now I can get my PhD. You know, that is not the right way to think about what you're doing. And so I find that keeping my focus here really helps me to have the right level of satisfaction and keep me going in this job and keep me in this job. And so in that sense, I want to share with you